Hello and welcome back, and as promised, I've stuck to my promise of releasing monthly content. It's not part 2 to the Magnus video just yet, simply because he's taking a little bit longer than expected and I hate painting large models, I've decided. So instead today we are looking at my other love, oil paints, and mixing it with my other favourite hobby, model painting. But first of all,
welcome to Jurassic Park.
that's enough of that. Yes, as an extra special welcome and thank you, you will be receiving the Enjoy Painting More mascot, which is used across all of my social media and was the first miniature which really sort of kicked off the popularity of the channel. So yeah, thank you very much, and I will be cracking on also with the Discord channel and means of community contact as soon as we have a couple of more members. And on that note, what we will be doing is with the part 2 release of the Magnus the Red video, be making the announcement that the first 20 members will get put into a raffle, and the Magnus will go to the winner of said raffle. Yes, that is indeed a new microphone, drastically increasing the quality of the audio, as many people always comment should be improved on. Mid-video, so that's professional, but there you go, better audio. So, on with the video at hand. Contrast paints made from oil paints, you say? Is he mad? Possibly. However, I have been watching a lot of tutorials recently. Came across a number of videos of people painting miniatures with oil paints, which is very interesting. And this really did pique my interest, as oil painting is one of my other hobbies, as I like to rant on about, oh, get him. But there was some really interesting concepts out there and some really nice work. But as from a miniature painting point of view, I mean, some of these people maybe haven't used oil paints artistically. Some maybe have and just maybe don't know about some of the other products that are out there. But I was just hoping to really add to give my part to the community here and maybe go over a few things which would maybe help using oil paints even more. But yeah, and in no way is this a criticism of any of the tutorials out there where people have used oil paints at all. This is more of an addition, as I say, my way of wanting to give a little to the community, if possible. So yeah, one of the things with oil paints, if you've ever used them, is they are very thick, very, for lack of a better expression, very pasty. They're more like a paste. They do not flow very well. So a lot of painters will thin their miniatures, thin their paint down, their oil paints down with either oil, traditionally linseed oil, or they will use white spirits, or a mixture of both of those, which both have their advantages and disadvantages. Now, if you use oils, you will drastically increase the drying time of your paints, which for miniatures is not necessarily always a good thing. They can also be very thick as well, very viscous. And the alternative side of things, if you use mineral spirits, white spirits, you will thin down your paints. Now, there's nothing new about oil paint washes. Those have been around for a long time. You've probably come across those in videos prior. The downside of those is they make your paints very watery. So what you end up with then is something consistency of a wash, which will then flow too much. It's great to be used as a wash, but you try to put that on top of a base coat, you're going to create a whole kind of different kind of mess. So yeah, they're ideal for washes, recesses, things as such, but painting, not so much. So I'm offering here an alternative. So as you can see here in the back, I'm using something called Liquid Fine Detail. Now, imagine this as your contrast medium. This is an oil paint medium, drastically decreases the drying time of oil paints. It's still going to be a long time. There's still high drying times for these things. But what this is going to do is this is going to give us the surface tension or the viscosity. It's going to give us the ability to apply this to an acrylic undercoat such as Wraithbone, as we're using on this test miniature here. And it is very, very simple. We're just using a pipette here just to literally place a couple of drops of this onto whatever you're using as a palette. And then we're going to use an old paintbrush just to literally take the tiniest amount of this oil paint to mix with that medium to create us something which would normally be the consistency of the contrast paint, or even if you wanted the standard base paints that you would use even if you're not wanting to use the contrast method. So just to reiterate here, as you can see, the tiniest amount of paint is needed to do this. And I cannot stress enough here to use an old brush. Also, if you're going to paint in this method, do not use your best brushes. The best brushes to use for this, I would recommend, would be a synthetic brush. As to clean your brushes, you're going to need to use mineral spirits or white spirits, which can be quite tough on non-synthetic brushes. So yeah, don't use your best brushes for this method. So as you can see here, as we've already shown over, we have used green. So a simple colour called sap green. It's way too deep for a plague marine. I just wanted to use something which had some pigment. This was all testing, first time for me as well. Now I'm moving on to a brown colour. Can I say I'm already happy, already super happy with these results. So as you can see, we're just applying it to the miniature as we normally would. Pretty good coverage already. This is just with one coat. Ignore the lighter areas, they were test areas, different mediums, things as such. This was the one that I settled on. And you may be asking why use oil paints. Now there are a few reasons. Firstly, I mean, I'm happy with this result. I think this looks fantastic, especially using the contrast method. The possibilities are endless. I mean, this stuff wet blends better than any acrylic paints that I've used, due to the fact that it stays wet for so long. Downsides of that are obvious, in that it may mean you need to come back to different areas of models later on. Then there is the cost factor. The medium you saw me using cost around about £5 per bottle. You get a lot. I'm gonna look. 75ml. I am gonna look. And the paints themselves, often I use a site called Art Discount. I'm sure there are many more out there. And if you buy these paints on sale, you can normally get these tubes, big 75ml tubes, and you've seen how little of this we need to use. You can get these tubes for £2, £3, £4 at most. These are going to last you forever. And by that I mean that, you know, people throw around these phrases all of the time, but basically you are not going to need to replace your paints. You could use these every day for the rest of your painting life, and I would be confident you wouldn't get through a full tube. Another advantage, as shown in the background, is you can completely control the amount of pigment that you have, because these paints have got such a high content of pigment. What it means is you can create a pool up, as you can see in the background. What I'm doing with this pink, realise this is way too deep for what I'm going to be using it for. So next to this, I've just got some of this medium on the palette on its own, and then I can take part of the previous mixture and completely control how much of this stuff that I want to use to get the transparency needed for example, these fleshy pinky bits that I'm painting on this model. And as you can see, even with thin glazes, you do get really nice deep colours with this. One thing I will say is these paints do dry very gloss, So if you are like me and that's something that you do not like, you will need to go over those with a matte varnish. Now that's not a bad thing. What it means is, I don't varnish nowhere near as enough as I should. What it means is kind of like saving your work. So once this is dried, matte varnish over the top, ready for coat 2. If you're doing it that way and you make mistakes, it's so easy to clean up those mistakes. Also means that you can use acrylic washes on top of this. Yet again, not a bad thing. As mentioned, this stuff will stay wet for hours, and by hours I genuinely mean hours. You may be waiting a fair few hours before it dries. What that means is with working wet on wet, with parts you're unhappy with parts that you don't believe you've got the saturation that you've wanted on the model, what you can do is you can use a higher pigment load, such as as we went back to earlier on saying that I'd thinned this paint down. Some areas I found it was too desaturated. So what I can then do is I can add more pigment into the areas where I want a higher saturation. You know, this part of the model we painted a long time ago, and as you see, what we can do is we can still control the paint flow. We can still control where we want the paint to be, add more pigment to the already wet paints, and get the desired result that you want. And as you can see there, it is still flowing as good as when we first originally put that first layer on, and we can still control that pigment, get it where we need into all those nice crevices to make that tentacle look really nice. So that pretty much concludes the informational part of the video. As you can see in the back, I'm still using an extra colour here to try just show extra use of this. So I'm using whatever that was I had up on the screen a moment ago. It was too light for me, raw sienna I think it was, so I'm mixing a little bit of the brown that we mixed 4 days ago, however long ago it was. Joking, it was a few hours ago. We're just going to be painting the bone areas. Yet again, this was too light for me. Didn't like it as a burn colour. Okay, because we're only testing. So what you can see here, at least, in a moment, is what I can then do is because the flow of this paint and its long drying times are so versatile, it means we can go in there with some of that darker brown we've got. I think it was raw umber, that original colour, and what we can do is we can mix this wet on wet to get the desired effects we want. We could remove paint if we wanted from the tips to make that lighter. As I say, there's all sorts we can do. These paints are so versatile. It's a great way to improve your brushwork as well, by the way, rather than concentrating on colours and highlights and edges, things like that. Edge highlights, I'm going to say it. So that pretty much concludes this video. I shall leave the last few minutes of me messing around with these paints for anyone who wants to watch that. And please drop me a like and a subscribe if you like the content. By all means, leave me a comment. Let me know if you would like to see more content like this, if you would like to see this explored further with these oil paints, as I'm sure there's much more testing to be done on this method, or if it's just been a colossal waste of time. Either way, let me know. And keep yourselves safe and sane. Hopefully till next time. Thank you.